So, okay. But before I talk about rapport, I want to share a little story with you that when I was taking teachers training course, I got like, well, I had the opportunity to read this article, and to be honest, I felt it because I had a similar experience. Okay. So this story is told by Tandy Taylor, who is an English teacher. She have had experience teaching like to children, young adults, teenagers, etc. She's had a very big career when it comes to second language teaching. And this story took place in Ukraine. She was giving English classes to militaries, to Ukrainian militaries, and she mentions that she had this one student, okay? This student's name is Vitaly. And she mentions that this student, he would participate like, I don't know, when he has like to do like a project, written projects, like grammar exercises and everything. But he had this situation. He was not able to speak. I mean, he was like so scared of speaking. Every time she asked him to participate, he just couldn't do it. He couldn't do it at all. So she tried like several techniques. She mentioned that she tried to make him work with the most participative student, and it didn't work. With the funniest student, and it didn't work. I mean, this student was not saying a word in English. So she was like, okay, what is happening? Why does he is not participating? Like, what is happening? Maybe is my teaching techniques, like what is happening? So she mentions that at the end of the course, they got a gathering, like a goodbye gathering. And she was like, okay, I need to ask this student what happens. And she says that after, well, some drinks, because they were drinking, she mentions that it was like a mix of Russian, Ukrainian, and broken English, like the languages they were able to communicate. And she mentions that this student was like sharing her bad experience he had with a teacher. And it is important to mention that this student was a pilot and that he was decorated several times because of his bravery. He had flown several missions in Afghanistan. So we're talking about a brave man. So when Tandy realized that this student was not speaking, she was like, but why? Like, what's happening here? So this student told her, or well, this military told her that he had an English teacher at elementary school, and that this teacher bullied him, that when he was about to participate, she was just like picking on him and making him feel bad about himself. So he said that from that experience, from that bad experience, he was not able to put a foot on an English classroom. Then like 40 years later, well, not 40, but probably like 30 years later, he had to step on a classroom again in Tandy's classroom in order to learn English because of his job. And he mentions that even though he had like a very dangerous job as a soldier, as a pilot, he was not afraid as he was in her classes, like in Tandy's classes. So she realized that, or well, not realized, but she was aware again of the power that the teachers have when they are in a classroom. And that is a little bit of what I am going to talk about. So at the beginning, I mentioned that when I first read this article, I was like, that happened to me. And I am going to tell you a little bit of my academic background. I just finished my BA as a English teacher. I studied in a public university in Mexico, and I have been taking like probably English classes for around 7 years, more or less. And I already had like a general knowledge of English language, just like English language. And in my university, they give us like two options. We can choose between English or French in order to do our emphasis in. So I was like, okay, I already know English. I would like to have my emphasis in French because I already have like some knowledge. So it's going to be an amazing opportunity for me. So the first semester was awesome. The second semester was awesome again. But when I got to the third semester, I got this teacher that was a very difficult person. I mean, when she was like giving us like French classes, she was like so rude to us. She treated us like as we have no idea we were talking about. And I remember this one time where she asked me to read out loud. So I was like, okay. And I was like standing up in the middle of the classroom, reading the text she asked me to. And there is this phrase, I will never forget this phrase, that is de rien, that it means again. So we all knew that when she said de rien, it means like you have to read again. But she said that because we were not pronouncing the words correctly. So instead of telling us like you should pronounce it this way or pronounce it the way it was supposed to be, she just looked at us and was like, de rien. And you were just like so nervous, like, okay, I said it again. But sometimes you have no idea like what to say because she was not giving us feedback. And you could be like standing up in the middle of the classroom, like for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, reading the same sentence again and again without having any kind of feedback, and you were able to see it if you had the opportunity to guess the correct pronunciation, or maybe not guessing but remembering the correct pronunciation. Or probably she was like, okay, that's enough, and she was like, sit down, and she asked another student to stand up in order to continue reading. So from that experience, my French grades were like really, really bad. And I remember that that semester was like really tough for me, speaking like in French class. And then I was in the fourth semester, and I was like, I won't be able to make it because from the third semester where I had this French teacher, French was like really difficult to me. I was afraid of learning it. I was just like picture her like telling me off. So which do you think is now my emphasis, English or French, because of this experience I just told you about? You can write it in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone as you wish, but from this, exactly, Sophia. So from that experience, I was like, I'm not good for French. This is not going to work. So let's go back to English, okay? So I had this experience, and let's say everything went normal, but then I had this learning and language acquisition. And then we saw a topic about bad experiences and good experiences while learning a second language. And I realized that it was not just me, that having a bad experience in a classroom makes you like take certain decisions. And that's a little bit of, well, that is one of the things I am going to talk about. So beginning now with this presentation, okay, I wanted to give you this because it's like a general context of, or well, a background, and one of the reasons I choose to do this research, okay? And I want to start this presentation with Tandy's phrase that says, I think it is very easy to forget how much power we have as teachers and our ability to influence our students long after they left the classroom. And that is something that happened to me. I think that that teacher like probably was not aware of the influence and the power she had upon her students. And as it was mentioned in the first conference, we do influence our students, and this influence can be either positive or negative. And let's go to the next part. Okay, as the title of the presentation says, it is building rapport. But what does rapport mean? According to the dictionary Merriam-Webster, rapport is a friendly, harmonious relationship or a relationship characterized by agreement, mutual understanding, or empathy that makes communication possible or easy. And it is important to mention that a rapport is not exclusive or like of teaching. Rapport can be present in a businessman with his client, a doctor with his patient, her patient, and of course, rapport can be present between teachers and students. And according to Harmer, rapport is a relationship that the learners have with the teachers and vice versa. Okay, good. And another thing that it is important to mention is that usually rapport is taken more into consideration when it comes to basic education like elementary school, junior high school, and sometimes in high school. And according to Palma from Sonora's University, right now, the effectiveness, it's not like very important in professional studies, in college studies, but social demands right now are asking for this effectiveness to be taken into consideration in the learning process of university students. So when I was doing this research, while I was like looking for rapport or effectiveness in teaching, I found like that most of the articles and the research were focused on basic education, and like very, very few researches were focused on higher education. So I decided to do this research in higher education because of this, because there are like there is not a lot of information in this field, and because the experience I had, it was when I was studying university. So I already told you about a personal experience I had, but is building rapport an important aspect for students in their second language learning process? As I mentioned, rapport can be present in several situations. And of course, this work is focused on learning, but second language learning. However, I think that the results that were received here can also apply for teaching in general. And in order to find if this was an important aspect for students, I use Krashen's affective filter hypothesis as the basis of my research. According to Krashen, affective variables are related to second language achievement, and these variables can be either positive or negative. I'll furtherly talk about these variables and the effect they can have in the second language learning process. As well as Krashen's affective filter hypothesis, I also took some factors that can influence the second language learning process. The author of this article where I found this is Nina Espada. And she talks that, or well, she mentions that some factors that can influence this process can be either internal or external. In the internal factors, we can find age, personality, intrinsic motivation, experiences, cognition, and native language. For the external factors, we've got curriculum, instruction, culture, and status, access to native speakers, support at home, extrinsic motivation, and learning environment. So as we can see here, not all of the factors can be provoked by teachers. Some of the factors that can influence in a positive or negative way can be brought by the students themselves. However, one of the objectives of my research was to find, well, first, if it was important, how does it affect to build rapport in second language teaching, and to share some techniques in order to build rapport with students. So I am going to focus on two external factors that are extrinsic motivation and learning environment. When it comes to learning environment, I found that it is referred to the space in which favorable conditions exist in order for learning to take place. And the learning environment usually is seen as a classroom, only the infrastructure, materials, etc. But it is important to mention that the teacher is part of this learning environment, as well as the discourse and performance of the teacher. So the teacher, as you can see, is part of the learning environment, which is one of the factors that can affect the second language learning process. And one person that can provide students with this extrinsic motivation are teachers. It is well known that some students are motivated by friends, by their families, and so on, and they can receive this extrinsic motivation from other sources. But in this case, we're going to focus on the extrinsic motivation that is provided by teachers. Well, in order to see if it was an important aspect, first, I took into consideration these factors mentioned by Nina Espada, and as the hypothesis of Stephen Krashen, but I also wanted to ask students if it was important for them. So I gathered a series of aspects that are important for students when it comes to their learning process. And I used a questionnaire that was applied in Google Forms in order for them to answer it. There were some closed questions, open questions, and in one section, it was a part that asked the students to number the aspects that you can see here in the dark blue part. They had to put them from 1 to 10, 1 being the most important and 10 being the least important in their aspect in their second language learning process. So the aspects that I put here in this questionnaire were the subject, schedule, teacher's personality, class activities, motivation, relation with classmates, teacher's attitude, teacher's subject proficiency, punctuality, and teacher's responsibility. In order to answer this, 134 university students took part in this research, and these were their results. The most important aspect for students in their second language learning process is teacher's subject proficiency. Then it is followed by motivation, and then by teacher's attitude, then teacher responsibility, subject, teacher's personality, class activities, schedule, and the relationship with classmates. As we can see here, it is not the most important for students the rapport or the relation that is built with their teacher, and the relation is related to their attitude and their personality. However, it is one of the most important that are mentioned. So once I found out that it was an important aspect for students, I wanted to see like, how does building rapport affect in second language learning for students? So going back a little bit to the affective filter hypothesis, there it is mentioned the two following terms. the low affective filter and the high affective filter. So according to Gratian, a low affective filter is related to high motivation, self-confidence, good self-image, and a low level of anxiety. And he mentions that when a student has a low affective filter in a second language classroom, this affective filter has a positive effect in the student's second language learning process. But when it comes to the high affective filter, it means that a student has low motivation, lack of self-confidence, low self-esteem, and anxiety. He mentions that all of these factors result in this high affective filter, and they had a negative effect in the student's second language learning process. And there is an abstract from this part. Exactly as Carla mentions, motivation is a really big deal. And most of the times we teachers are the main providers of our students' motivation. So this is like really, really important to take into consideration. And going back here, it says, Gratian claims that learners with high motivation, self-confidence, a good self-image, and a low level of anxiety are better equipped for success in second language acquisition, which was what we just mentioned with this low affective filter. Now, when it comes to low motivation, low self-esteem, and debilitating anxiety, all of these factors can combine to raise the affective filter, so it is a high affective filter, and form a mental block. So here it is mentioned this term, the mental block, and this can be because of a series of affective aspects like the ones we just mentioned, and this negative this affective high affective filter reflects as a mental block, which in the end is a negative effect in the student's second language learning process. Now, here it is mentioned that this mental block prevents comprehensible input from being used for acquisition. In other words, when the filter is up, it impedes language acquisition. So here, according to Schutz, who also took into consideration Gratian's affective filter hypothesis, he mentions that this filter can either be positive or negative. However, how does this affective filter hypothesis relates with building rapport? Well, when teachers care about being positive towards their students, when they care about creating a positive learning environment, we are able to lower the students' anxiety level. I know that self-esteem is a delicate topic because that can be an internal factor of students, but it is well known that teachers do affect in the self-esteem of students. Sometimes students can be very participative, but if a teacher, it's like giving, let's say, a negative feedback or is rude towards the student, it is going to cause them to feel like they don't know, and their self-esteem can go low. So as well as we can get our students' self-esteem low, we can also work on helping them to raise their self-esteem. Here in this case, I consider it can be quite complicated because there are some other factors that can interfere in this special aspect when it comes to the self-esteem. But for example, low motivation, we can perfectly work with that in our second language classroom. And also, this was like the theoretical part, but in the questionnaire that I previously mentioned, one of the questions that was there is, do you consider teachers' attitude affects in your learning process? From the 134 students who were part of this research, 98.5% said yes. This means that 132 students expressed that the teacher's attitude in their second language classroom affects in their learning process. So this attitude is related to the previous aspects that were mentioned. For example, the affective filter hypothesis, we just talked about that if a teacher cares about creating a positive learning environment, we can lower this affective filter in order to be something positive for our students' learning process. So the attitude definitely affects when it comes to building rapport, and according to the students that were able to answer this questionnaire and that took part in this research, it is important for them. So once that this was like confirmed, the other question came up: how to build rapport with students. We already know that it is an important aspect for our students. We already know that it can affect our students' learning process in a positive or negative way, but how can we build this rapport with students? Well, there are some techniques that were gathered from a Canadian university as well as a Texan university. And the first one, that it's like mandatory, basically, it's like introduce yourself. Sometimes when we are like in the first class, we're like, okay, guys, so please introduce yourself so we can know each other better. And, you know, there are always a student that is like, I don't want to talk, or that it's shy, that does not want to share a lot. So we can set the example by introducing ourselves. For example, if we arrive to our classroom like, hello, my name is Flor de María Núñez Hernández. I am going to be your English teacher. We will be working together for this term. I come from Mexico, and well, the information you want to get from the students is the information you have to give them. For example, if you want to know maybe their age or what do they like, why they don't like, it is important that you set the example. In this way, they can feel like in a more comfortable environment. And also, another important aspect that was mentioned by these authors was like to smile. Probably this can be underrated, but let's be honest. No one likes a teacher that arrives to the classroom with an angry face, because the moment you see the teacher with an angry face or with a face that I don't want to be here, you're like, come on, the class is going to be boring, or I don't know. At least I feel like the teacher is not happy being in the classroom, and it's like, for me, it's like a wall between me and the teacher, but more than the teacher, like the knowledge itself. Because if you see that the teacher is not with a good attitude, you'll be like, well, I can pay attention to other things. So an important thing, it is to smile. Maybe, well, with this, I am not saying like smile the whole session, because it is not possible, but at least when you arrive to the classroom, like, hello guys, or enter the classroom with a smile, or finish with a smile. Okay. Another important aspect is to make eye contact with students, so they feel that you are acknowledging them. And with this one, it is also important to be careful. We must make eye contact, but not too much, because sometimes students can feel like super observed, and that can be counterproductive. I mean, when you're speaking, you can look to all of your classmates, sorry, to look to your students, and do not focus only on one. Like, try to be like watching, like, or well, looking to all of them. Also, sometimes I know that it can be difficult. I know that we're teachers and we're supposed to have like everything under control, but there are some teachers that are quite sometimes afraid of making eye contact. So if that is your special situation, you, instead of making eye contact, you can just focus on the forehead of the students, and it is like as if you were making eye contact to them, and it's unnoticeable. So you can do that. Also, and something that I consider very important is to learn students' names. And I know this can be quite complicated if we have a lot of students. So, for example, at the moment where I work, that is Universidad Politécnica de Otzolotepec, I have my group, And in my group, I have 36 students. And probably you'll say, okay, 36 students, that's not a big number, because I know that in Latin America, there are very, very big numbers when it comes to classrooms. But here's the thing. Per term, I also give some workshops. So in total, I have like in this school around 100 and 150 students. So it is complicated to learn all of their names. So we must see like which techniques work for us. So personally, I like to ask students to write a tag with their name and to have it at least 1 week. In each class, please have your tag so I can see your name and so on. Right now, well, we are still in online classes and we can see the name in their, well, for example, here in Zoom, we got the picture and then we got the name or maybe the initials. And sometimes this can be easier here because we see the names, but we don't see the faces. So when sometimes we have like face-to-face sessions, I recognize them by their voice, but not because of their face, because sometimes they don't want to turn on their cameras. So hopefully this technique to learn students' names will be like used again more in the future when everyone is in the classroom again, because as I mentioned here, we got the names here in the computer all the time. So sometimes we don't really pay attention to learning the names because we have it there, okay? But when we have face-to-face sessions, it is important to refer to our students by their names, because in that way they feel valuable and they feel that we care about them. Also, to use humor. This can depend on you, of course. There are some teachers that their personality allows them to use humor in the classroom, and to be careful about the humor to use, of course, not to making like black humor jokes or things that can offend students. So just like a small joke, probably because a situation that happened in the classroom, something like that. But once again, this can depend on yourself. Some teachers say like, I don't feel comfortable using humor because I think, or I feel that I can lose the class management. It's respectable. Here are just some techniques and you decide which ones to use, which one not to use. And also another important thing is that you have to feel comfortable when you give your class. Here are some techniques. And when I shared this part, some teachers were like, but what if I don't feel comfortable smiling? Or what if I don't like to use humor or things like that? And I was like, okay, here you should see what works for you, what does not work for you. And another important thing is like to pay attention to our personality. Like probably to me, it won't be helpful to use humor, probably for another teacher it is. And maybe we want to adopt that technique, but it is important to take into consideration that something that is going to work for another teacher does not necessarily is going to work for me. So there is here we have to try like what we think that can be helpful for us, and in the process we're going to see if it works or if it does not. Okay. The next one, it is to pay attention to their nonverbal behavior. And sometimes their students' body language tell us like everything. They tell us if they are not comfortable. For example, I like when I am in face-to-face classes, I like to be monitoring students. I like to be walking around the classroom, like watching like they are like making or well answering their books or writing something. I like to be just monitoring like, oh, what are you writing and things like that. And sometimes the students do not feel comfortable with that. So they would be like, they covering their notebooks, their books. So we have to pay attention to that in order to respect the students' the students' borders. Some other techniques is to be enthusiastic about your class, and this is quite related to the one of smiling. For example, if you arrive to a classroom where a teacher it's like, or well, it's having an attitude in which he or she is showing that he's not excited about his or her class, that this person is worth, of course, this is going to be transmitted to our students. And once again, I think that no student wants to be in a classroom where a teacher does not want to be either. So we gotta be enthusiastic about our class. We can transmit that to our students. To move around the classroom, what I was just mentioning, to be monitoring, I think that is something good, because sometimes some students are afraid of asking for help, like in front of the whole classroom. So if you're monitoring and you see that a student is struggling, you can approach and you can have like a personalized, let's say, error correction or some more personalized feedback, because you're just talking to the student. And something I realized when I was like monitoring was precisely that when you're just walking around the classroom, even students themselves, they approach to you like, oh, teacher, can you check this? Or teacher, can you help me with that? And I, well, in the few experience I have as an English teacher, I realized that I am able to give more feedback when I am walking around the classroom, that when I ask the students, like, do you have any question or something like that. Also, to make gestures, this is related to body language. We already know that movements can help us to transmit certain things, so we should not be afraid to use them. And another thing we should not be afraid of is to make fun of ourselves. I think that more than one of us has, as we say in Mexico, hemos hecho el oso in the classroom. And sometimes it is like, oh, come on, now how can I continue? I mean, laugh of yourself. We're humans, we make mistakes. So we should learn of this part, and don't feel bad about it. As I mentioned, this happens to all of us. And another thing is to embrace your mistakes and learn from them. Here, when it comes to learning, I think that teachers, or well, not, I don't think, I am sure that teachers and everybody never finish learning. We are in a constant learning process. So something we also have to acknowledge is that as teachers, we don't know everything, and that we should be open to also learn from our students, because there are also some teachers that I am the teacher and I know everything, and when they make a mistake and the students, not that they highlight or that they attack the teacher because of this, but they mention like, oh, teacher, I think it is this way, that can be like, that can create an argument that can affect learning environment. Also, something that was mentioned was to participate in extracurricular activities. I know that this is like in an ideal world, because most of us work in more than one university and we start working like super early. We probably finish at midday and then we have to go running to another school, and it is like, well, I don't have time for that, and it is understandable. But if you do have the opportunity to be able to participate in an extracurricular activity in the place you're working, do it, because in that way you're able to know your students in a context that is not the classroom. You're able to know their backgrounds, and that is something that was mentioned in the first lecture. It is important to know our students' backgrounds. Not only to know our students, but also to know how we can work with them. And something that we should be really, really, really careful of is the following. And it is like warning. It says, set the tone. As with using the whole first day, establishing ground rules from the beginning of the semester sends a clear message to your students. So when we build rapport, or when we talk about rapport, some teachers are like not convinced. They're not very convinced of this part because years ago it was seen, or well, the relation that was between a teacher and a student was, let's say, seen as the teacher is the superior one and students should just look up at their teachers, and even classrooms. To be honest, I don't know in other countries, but at least in Mexico, in the elementary school I attended, there was this platform for the teacher to stand in, so the teacher was like up or of the students. And well, I saw that also in some public junior high schools. And then I had the opportunity to be in a high school, but this high school, it's a private school and it's quite new. So what I could notice of the architecture and the infrastructure of the classroom, it was that instead of the teacher being in a platform, the teacher was at the bottom, and then the classroom was like going up, and the students were like looking to the teacher. With this, I am not saying that they were looking down to the teacher, because it's not like that, but I want to show how also architecture changed when it comes to the relationship that has been evolving, or how society sees the relationship between teachers and students. So I mentioned this because sometimes teachers still feel like I am the teacher and that's it. But we should know that more than teachers or knowledge providers, we are role models. And sometimes we are the motivation that our students need. Sometimes we are their safe place. Most of the times the classroom is a safe place for students, but we should be very careful with this. So when we want to build rapport, it can be misunderstood as being, let's say, friends with students or allowing them to do whatever they want. And this is not the case. So one thing we should care about, and something we should have really, really clear, is that even though we are going to work on building rapport, we should set the tone. I mean, not being rude towards students or something like that, but establishing rules from the very, very beginning, it's really important, because with these rules, we are going to make possible to rapport to happen and not allowing students to do whatever they want. So for example, it says, set the rules from the beginning in order to avoid misunderstandings in future classes. And once rules have been presented, teachers should follow them all the time. So here's the thing. For example, sometimes when we are empathic, when we're respectful towards our students, and this has happened to me several times, that, I don't know, I say, okay, this project needs to be due on Friday. Okay, the due date comes and the student is like, teacher, can I give you my project, or can I do my project on Monday because I had this and that and so on. And sometimes, yes, I know we all have our personal situations, but we should stick to our rules. Like, okay, I understand you have this situation, but I said that the due date was today, so I need your work today. Or maybe, yes, I can accept your work, but you're going to have a lower grade than it was supposed to. So if we follow the rules we set on the very first day, our students are going to get used to following these rules too. So this is really, really important. Even though we have to be empathic and care about creating a positive learning environment with our attitude, with our teaching strategies, we should have this very, very, very present, because otherwise, once our students know that they can do whatever they want, it's really, really complicated to get the classroom management back. And something that was mentioned is that teachers influence students a lot. And more than in their learning process, we can influence them in their lives. And this last extract, I took it from Tandy Taylor's article, which was mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture. And it says, we can make them or break them, build them up or tear them down, use our skills or abuse our skills, and we should never, ever forget that. And this is a message I want to give you at this end, well, at the end of this presentation, because I think this is something we should really take into consideration. We can use our skills or abuse our skills when we're teaching. We can use our strategies, our skills, our personality, our materials, everything in order to create a positive learning environment, in order to create rapport with our students. And in this way, don't have like students with a high affective filter, or we can do completely the opposite. So this is something you should really, really take into consideration. And that could be it. Thank you so much. If you have any question, any comment, please feel free to ask them. Thank you so much.